Royal Lodge sits deep within Windsor Great Park, framed by trees that have watched generations come and go. At dusk, its windows glow with a quiet steadiness, a rhythm unchanged for decades. Yet inside this calm exterior lies one of the most unexpected stories in the modern monarchy. A partnership that survived long after the marriage it once defined. For more than 30 years, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew have carved out a life within these grounds that few would have predicted. Divorced in the 1990s, shaped by turbulent headlines and shifting royal expectations, they chose to remain under the same roof, not out of duty, but out of familiarity. In an institution built on clarity of roles and boundaries, theirs became an arrangement that felt almost radical in its simplicity. Royal Lodge offered them something the outside world rarely did: space to breathe. Here, the formality of royal life softened, routines developed, a long friendship settled into something steady and unspoken. The public saw an unconventional living situation. Those closer understood it as a quiet pact, built on shared history and a sense of mutual sheltering. But every refuge carries its own truth. A house that protects can also conceal, and a bond preserved by habit can be tested when the stability around it begins to falter. As the monarchy moves through a period of recalibration, Royal Lodge now stands not only as their sanctuary, but as the stage for the most delicate question of all. If this house held them together for so long, what happens when the ground beneath it begins to shift? As the public conversation around Sarah Ferguson shifted in the 1990s, reinvention became essential. She stepped gradually into a new chapter, writing children's books filled with optimism, appearing on television with humour and candour, and supporting charitable causes with genuine dedication. Each effort helped soften earlier memories and reshape her public identity, though questions of perception lingered with every step. Royal Lodge became both a refuge and workspace. It offered continuity, a quiet place where books were drafted, interviews prepared, and new opportunities explored. Yet this same stability tied her journey to Andrew, making her reinvention inseparable from their continued closeness. Admirers saw loyalty, critics saw complication. Still, her renewed image gained momentum. She spoke openly about mental health, appeared at literary events, and raised Beatrice and Eugenie with a deliberate focus on stability and gratitude. Her warmth, humour, and devotion as a mother helped shift public sentiment. But reinvention is fragile. It depends on timing, perception, and the willingness of institutions to adapt. Royal Lodge supported her resurgence, yet it also linked her to a partnership increasingly scrutinised by a changing monarchy. It sheltered her, yes, but it would soon become the place where her renewed story faced its greatest test. Behind the confidence of Fergie's later public appearances lay pressures that seldom reached the headlines. Reinvention reshaped her image, but it did not erase the financial and emotional complexities that had followed her for years. Royal Lodge helped her regain stability, yet it also concealed a quieter truth. Resilience often requires compromise. Finances were one of the oldest threads in her story. Over the decades, reports highlighted fluctuating income, intricate agreements, and the difficulty of sustaining a life once tied, however loosely, to royal expectation. Maintaining a standard that was dignified rather than lavish created pressures that did not always match the opportunities available to her. In that sense, Royal Lodge functioned not only as sanctuary, but as necessity, a place where continuity softened the impact of an unpredictable professional landscape. Living with Prince Andrew, though unconventional, addressed many practical challenges. It offered security, familiarity, and a shared domestic rhythm that reduced the burdens of running two separate households. Those close to them often described the arrangement as comfortable rather than curious, a partnership grounded in ease, shaped by decades of shared humour, habits, and history. Emotional support played a role, practical stability played another. Yet this closeness blurred certain boundaries. It prompted questions about independence, not emotionally, but in the structural ways that shape reputation. Fergie's steadfast loyalty to Andrew, particularly during periods of intense public scrutiny, was viewed by some as admirable devotion. Others saw it as a reminder of the reputational risk that proximity can carry, even when one is not directly involved. The line between solidarity and dependence grew harder to define. Inside Royal Lodge, life felt gentle and steady. Its long corridors, muted light, and the quiet of Windsor Great Park created an atmosphere that protected them from external noise. But insulation has its cost. It can make change feel distant until it is suddenly unavoidable. It can delay decisions that independence might otherwise accelerate. and it can create the illusion that long-standing arrangements will endure unchallenged. For Fergie, the hidden cost emerged in several ways. There were opportunities she declined because they required a clearer separation from Royal Lodge or a more defined life beyond Andrew. There were public moments where loyalty guided her presence, even when silence might have protected her more effectively. And there was the constant undertone of uncertainty, the awareness that shifting royal priorities could, one day, reshape the future of the home that anchored her. As the transition under King Charles III gained momentum, discussions around royal properties grew more pointed. Modernisation emphasised efficiency, clarity, and a sharper distinction between working and non-working members of the royal family. Royal Lodge, with its size, history, and symbolic weight, inevitably entered this conversation. The emotional reality, however, was more delicate. Andrew's diminishing public role altered the dynamic within the household, increasing Fergie's responsibility to maintain stability. She continued to support her daughter's milestones with consistent warmth, yet the private pressures, financial, logistical, and reputational, accumulated quietly. The world beyond Royal Lodge was changing, and the house could no longer insulate them entirely. Gradually, the hidden cost became clear. The sanctuary that had long protected them also held them in suspension. Their domestic arrangement, once regarded as an eccentric but harmless curiosity, was now seen through a contemporary lens. Expectations were shifting. The monarchy was shifting. And with those shifts came the first tremors beneath the place they had long called home. The refuge that held them together was becoming fragile. There is rarely a single turning point in royal life, but certain moments reveal the culmination of years of quiet movement. For Fergie and Andrew, that moment arrived when public scrutiny and institutional reassessment converged on their long-standing life at Royal Lodge. What had persisted in relative calm for decades was suddenly placed under a far sharper light. The shift began with renewed discussions about the future of royal residences. As a streamlined approach grew central to the monarchy's long-term direction, properties with significant upkeep costs or complex historical arrangements naturally entered the conversation. Royal Lodge, large, symbolic, and deeply tied to tradition, became part of this broader appraisal. Initially, the scrutiny was not personal. It was administrative, structural, and aligned with a public expectation for transparency. But scrutiny has a way of shifting its focus, and soon attention broadened from the building itself to the lives within it. Commentary that once treated Fergie and Andrew's cohabitation as an eccentric but harmless curiosity began to analyse it through a different lens, one shaped by modern expectations and the changing culture of accountability. At the same time, Andrew faced one of the most difficult periods of his public life. His circumstances, widely reported and extensively discussed, influenced how Royal Lodge was perceived. A residence once seen as a discreet private refuge now appeared positioned at the intersection of relevance, responsibility, and evolving royal standards. It was no longer just a home. It had become a focal point for a broader conversation about the role of non-working royals in a changing monarchy. Fergie, by extension, was drawn into this moment. Her public image had been carefully rebuilt over many years, yet her presence at Royal Lodge meant her narrative could not easily be separated from Andrew's. Observers noted the dilemma. Her loyalty remained unmistakable, yet the consequences of that loyalty were becoming more visible. The arrangement that once shielded her was now shaping perceptions in ways she could not entirely control. The turning point was not defined by a single event. Instead, it surfaced through quiet, accumulating shifts. Editorials questioning the sustainability of the arrangement, public debate about the future of royal properties, and administrative reviews that signalled a different kind of future. Each detail added weight to a narrative that was slowly but unmistakably changing. Inside Royal Lodge, daily life continued with familiar rhythms. Shared breakfasts, quiet routines, the steady calm of Windsor Great Park surrounding them. But outside, the context had altered. Public sentiment still held sympathy for Fergie, yet it was tempered by an awareness of the complexities involved. The idea of Royal Lodge as a permanent, unchanging sanctuary no longer aligned with an era demanding clearer boundaries, more defined roles, and a stronger sense of accountability. Media coverage reflected this shift with a tone both measured and unmistakable. Royal Lodge was no longer framed as a charming anomaly, but as a symbol of an older arrangement coming under pressure from contemporary expectations. The implications were clear. The house could no longer remain outside the broader conversation about the monarchy's future. This was the moment of collapse, not of a relationship, but of an arrangement. The sanctuary that had survived decades of turbulence was suddenly exposed to forces it could not absorb. The logic that had once sustained their domestic life no longer held its place within an institution undergoing transformation. In that change lay the truth of the turning point. A refuge built on routine and shared history was now confronted by a future that demanded clarity, efficiency, and redefinition. Royal Lodge was no longer just a home, it had become a question, one that neither of them could answer alone. And when the headlines began to blur across printing presses, it marked the moment when the house that held them steady could no longer shield them entirely. The aftermath arrived quietly, not with a single decision, but with a series of shifts that altered the atmosphere around Royal Lodge. Conversations about the estate's future became more frequent. Reports described administrative reviews, long-term considerations, and the broader strategy of adapting royal properties to meet a new era. For Fergie, this period required remarkable composure. She continued her public appearances, maintained her charity commitments, and offered steady support to her daughters. Her resilience was evident, shaped by years of navigating public life with a mixture of humility and determination. Yet beneath the surface, the implications of the scrutiny surrounding Royal Lodge created a new and delicate tension. The household itself entered a phase of reassessment. Practical questions emerged. What would long-term stability look like for Andrew? What would it mean for Fergie if their shared refuge became uncertain? How could they preserve the continuity that had defined their family life while adapting to a landscape over which they had limited control? Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie played a quiet but significant role in this chapter. Their bond with their mother remained strong, and their lives, now shaped by marriages, careers, and growing families, provided Fergie with a renewed sense of purpose. She attended events, supported philanthropic projects alongside them, and maintained a presence that reflected dignity and care. Public sentiment during this aftermath was complex but considerate. There was no resurgence of the harsh judgment that had defined earlier phases of Fergie's life. Instead, the tone reflected caution, curiosity, and occasionally concern. Many recognised the humanity of the situation: a family adapting to change, a mother attempting to maintain stability, and a former royal couple navigating a transition that neither could easily control. Within Royal Lodge, life continued, but with an awareness that the nature of their refuge had shifted. Discussions became more practical. The uncertainty of Andrew's position, combined with the evolving expectations of the monarchy, introduced questions for which there were no immediate answers. Still, they carried on with the steady rhythm that had defined their unique partnership. Meals shared, conversations held, routines maintained. The public watched this phase not as a spectacle, but as a quiet evolution. Royal Lodge, once a backdrop rather than a central figure, now represented the delicate balance between personal history and institutional change. It became a symbol of how the past and present coexist, sometimes uneasily, within the fabric of royal life. For Fergie, the aftermath was not a period of decline but of adjustment. She continued to cultivate her public goodwill, leaning into the sincerity and warmth that had restored her image. Her charity work remained steady. Her literary projects continued. She appeared at selected, royal events with appropriate discretion. Yet through all these efforts ran a consistent thread: the need to navigate her future with careful judgment. The story of the aftermath is not dramatic, it is measured. It reflects the quiet persistence of someone accustomed to rebuilding, someone who understands that stability is earned slowly and can be unsettled quickly. The questions surrounding Royal Lodge did not undo her progress, but they altered the landscape in which that progress unfolded. And so the house that once provided certainty now represented a crossroads. Its future remained a topic of discussion rather than resolution. Its role in Fergie's life became less about permanence and more about transition. The aftermath was not an ending. It was the beginning of a period defined by patience, recalibration, and the steady pursuit of dignity amid uncertainty. In the quiet light of evening, Royal Lodge takes on a stillness that feels almost contemplative. It has stood through eras of celebration and change, carrying within its walls the stories of those who sought comfort and continuity behind its closed gates. For Fergie and Andrew, it became the setting for a partnership that defied convention, not quite marriage, not quite separation, but something sustained by history and familiarity. Their life here offers a rare perspective on loyalty within the monarchy. Few relationships endure so completely outside the formal structures of royal duty. Fewer still survive moments that might have fractured them permanently. Yet their bond persisted, shaped not by grand declarations, but by small acts of daily companionship. Shared routines, private humour, the ease of two people who no longer required explanation. This reflection does not seek to define their relationship in absolute terms. Instead, it acknowledges the complexity that has always surrounded it. Royal Lodge provided sanctuary, but it also presented challenges. It offered safety, yet tethered them to expectations that changed over time. It held their past, even as the monarchy moved steadily into a different future. What Royal Lodge represents today is a house caught between identities, historical and modern, intimate and institutional. It symbolises a monarchy attempting to reconcile tradition with practicality, personal loyalty with public responsibility. In this tension lies the essence of Fergie and Andrew's story. A life shaped by contrasts, held together by a bond that endures even when the world around it shifts. For Fergie, the lodge has been more than a residence. It has been a place of recovery, reinvention and reflection. It sheltered her during difficult years, provided space to rebuild, and became the backdrop against which she rediscovered a sense of purpose. Yet the uncertainty now surrounding its future raises a quiet question about the next chapter of her life. Will the house that once protected her continue to stand as her refuge? Or will it become a symbol of a closed chapter? A reminder of loyalty honoured, challenges endured, and change embraced, because it could no longer be postponed. The documentary does not offer a conclusion. Instead, it recognises that some stories remain open, defined by the choices still ahead. Royal Lodge stands as both witness and participant in this journey, holding within its walls the echoes of a bond that has resisted easy explanation for decades. As candlelight flickers against a rain-marked window, the final image is one of gentle stillness, a house that has shaped a life, now waiting to see what it will mean in the years to come. A refuge once relied upon, now standing on the threshold of whatever comes next.